The signal reached us at 3:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. By 9:47 a.m., half the world's observatories had gone silent. NASA, ESA, JAXA, Roscosmos all offline without explanation. 6 hours. That's all it took for every major space agency to vanish behind encryption. But before I explain what came next, I need your help. Look up tonight. Tell me what you see. Where I stand above a quiet city wrapped in streetlight haze, something is shifting in the sky, subtle distortions, as if the constellations themselves are holding their breath. Over the last 3 nights, atmospheric readings have shown irregular electromagnetic pulses. Unlike any solar event we've ever logged. Maybe it's nothing. But maybe it's starting again. My name is Dr. Michio Kaku, astrophysicist and reluctant messenger. I've spent my life believing the universe was grand but predictable, an expanding clockwork of beautiful equations and indifferent forces. I was wrong. I thought I'd die explaining string theory to bored students, not whispering warnings into the dark. What changed everything was the transmission from what we called Trident Atlas. You might remember its public name, the interstellar comet that drifted through our system in 2019. We thought it was harmless, a transient rock, icy debris on a journey from nowhere to nowhere. We'd seen interstellar drifters before, one in 2017 that defied some models but remained explainable. Astronomers are good at bending reality until it fits math. That's our favorite human trick. But Trident Atlas wasn't interested in being explained. Its movement defied celestial mechanics. It decelerated. Not a gravitational slingshot, not a gas jet or solar radiation push. It just slowed, as if someone had quietly tapped the brakes of a massive invisible ship. When 3 independent observatories confirmed it, we all felt that quiet panic scientists never admit to in public, the kind that hums under your ribs when a pattern refuses to behave. Then the message came, May 19, 2025. A pulse of electromagnetic energy, narrow and precise, lasting 11.7 seconds. 3 radio arrays on 3 continents captured it simultaneously. Not random cosmic chatter. A directed signal, aimed directly at Earth. The data began with a sequence we recognized instantly: prime numbers, encoded in binary. Then the constant ratios, the fine structure constant hydrogen spectral fingerprint, a cosmic hello in mathematics. We'd theorized intelligent life might start this way, a friendly handshake written in universal logic. But what followed turned every quiet observatory room into a cathedral of disbelief. The sequence shifted from base 2 to base 60. That's the sexagesimal system once used by the Sumerians 5 millennia ago. The same system that defines your hour's 60 minutes and a circle's 360 degrees. No accident, no coincidence. Think about that. A message from an object that started its journey millions of years before the first cities, yet referencing a human numbering system that didn't even exist then. Someone or something knew us intimately, or was waiting for us. The first team that decoded it worked in secrecy under a project code name I won't repeat here. What they discovered buried inside those mathematical layers made hardened scientists forget how to breathe. Hidden patterns formed star maps, 17 systems, each within 200 light years of Earth, marked with symbols we didn't recognize, all identical except one. Next to our sun, a broken circle. And beneath that broken circle, a numerical string that eventually resolved into what we now call the countdown. When the second transmission arrived 3 days later, I was inside the command wing of JPL. I'll never forget that silence, the kind that descends when every human being in a room realizes history has just forked. This time the message wasn't numbers. It contained a compressed audio layer. You can't transmit sound through vacuum, of course, but inside the electromagnetic envelope we found a recording, clear, haunting, undeniably human. A melody. The archivists traced it in minutes, a reconstruction of an ancient Sumerian hymn to Inanna, one of Earth's oldest surviving pieces of composed music. And someone out there, across interstellar distance, was playing it back to us. Only, the recording wasn't of the original notation. It used modern academic reconstruction completed in 2019. No random alien mimicry, it was our modern version exactly as recent scholars had pronounced it. Whoever sent that message had access to Earth's digital archives. Access or observation. The line between those two words has never felt so thin. When that melody filled the lab speakers, one of the linguists started to sob. I understood why. The sound wasn't just familiar, it felt intimate, like something meant to remind us of our own vulnerability. Beneath the music, another pattern beat steadily, a low rhythmic pulse perfectly consistent at 72 BPM, the heart rate of a resting adult human. Someone, or something, had recorded a human heartbeat in the stars. That night, the NASA director ordered complete lockdown. Within hours, 14 world leaders were patched into encrypted briefings. None of them smiled. You could feel the gravity, not the astrophysical kind, the human kind, the weight of knowing that our species had just been noticed. How do you tell 8 billion people that a visitor from beyond the edge of the galaxy is speaking in the voice of your ancestors? You don't. You stall, you classify, you pray that maybe, somehow it's just a trick of interpretation. Except it wasn't. Because by the time we finished decoding that second transmission, a third was already on its way. And what it carried would change everything. The object had stopped mimicking us. It was about to instruct us. And hidden in its diagrams lay proof that humanity's oldest structures weren't monuments at all. They were keys. The third transmission arrived before dawn on June 2, 2025. By then, Trident Atlas was already sliding back toward the outer system, glittering faintly beyond Mars' orbit, as if retreating toward the dark it came from. Whatever intelligence guided it had chosen its moment precisely. We had just enough time to glimpse the message, and not quite enough to understand it. This data package dwarfed the others. 4 minutes of continuous, densely encoded signal, no clear header, no filler, just pure information. When our decompression stream stabilized, the screens in JPL's operations room filled with geometric patterns, rotating lattices, curves nested inside curves. At first we thought they were abstract, a cosmic doodle drawn by mathematics itself, but then a young engineer gasped, zooming in on the repetition ratio of one of the spirals. It wasn't decoration, it was blueprint logic. Each cluster represented dimensional schematics, engineering rendered in a form closer to topology than drafting. Yet the math checked out. The first layer described what looked like an energy system, one that violated every conservation principle we hold sacred, theoretically impossible, practically irresistible, harnessing curvature of vacuum itself. The phrase stirred across the control room like a rumor from Genesis. Then someone overlaid Earth's orbital data onto one of the diagrams, and the shapes snapped into alignment. One symbol matched the orbit of a specific cluster of asteroids. Another traced our planet's equator. A third, our prime meridian. When we compiled them, the diagram began to map our world with eerie precision. The grid that emerged wasn't random. Luminous nodal points hovered where ancient monoliths stand today: Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Teotihuacan in Mexico, the Great Pyramids and the plateau beneath them, Angkor Wat, Stonehenge, Nazca, Easter Island. Each pulse on the globe brightened in rhythmic cadence, almost breathing. The implication hit us simultaneously. We weren't looking at ruins. We were looking at coordinates in a long sleeping network. The analysis team divided instantly. Half argued the message suggested these sites once functioned as a planetary sensor array, some resonance grid built by predecessors or patrons. The rest, including me, refused to say it aloud, because saying it out loud made it real. We were staring at proof that humanity's sacred places were engineered touchpoints. Beacons. In the left margin of the projection, a second image resolved. Earth again, this time viewed from far outside, our solar system framed within a transparent sphere, concentric layers of data orbiting like a cage. The labels corresponded to known trans-Neptunian objects, each glowing faintly. Not random ice specks, markers forming a shell exactly enclosing our system. Why does it look like a boundary? Someone whispered. No one answered, because boundaries imply intent. Someone had drawn a line around home. That day, the director classified the new dataset, SEAL Level 9, a category invented on the spot. Computers that even glimpsed the files were isolated, physically disconnected, processors buried in lead shielding. Despite every precaution, a third of the staff talked in half sentences, began working in pairs, avoiding mirrors. When knowledge becomes too heavy, it warps human behavior long before it warps physics. For 72 hours, Trident Atlas kept transmitting fragments, small mathematical clarifications, corrections to our quantum error filters, almost as if the sender wanted to help us decode it faster. Then, without warning, the signal ceased. We thought that was the end. 3 days of perfect silence. Deep space receivers logged only cosmic background hiss. The lull was almost merciful. Analysts began to hope it had been a fluke, a one-and-off contact. Some prayed it was. They were wrong. The final transmission arrived June 5 at precisely 0100 UTC. Astronomers love symmetry. The timing felt ceremonial, a cosmic page turning between two dates. The data burst was just 23 seconds long, yet the file size dwarfed everything we'd received before. Our decryption cluster choked, then screamed, figuratively and literally, as cooling fans roared under the impossible load. 14 hours later it yielded. What unfolded on screen wasn't a message, it was a chronicle. Imagine human history rewritten not on parchment or servers, but in the language of cause and probability. We saw a timeline stretching hundreds of thousands of years, punctuated by luminous markers, epochs of emergence, collapse, resurgence, civilizations that reached heights we've only begun to reapproach, cities erased by ice, continents rearranged. Each resurgence coincided with a symbol identical to the one marking our sun, a broken circle. The meaning became undeniable resets. Threaded through that impossible chronology were patterns of intervention, tiny nudges centuries or millennia apart. The sudden leap of cognition around 50,000 years ago. The inexplicable, simultaneous rise of agriculture across continents. The birth of written language in unconnected cultures. Each event flagged with the same annotation adjustment successful. I remember gripping the console edge when the realization crystallized humanity hasn't been writing its own story alone. We've been edited. The data concluded with a spread of exoplanets, other experiments, some stable, some extinguished, a few labeled with glyphs that evoked ascension or invitation. And then came the line that froze the control room. In 17 human languages, including English, Mandarin, Arabic, Swahili, and one we'd yet to identify, it read, "You are not prepared." The threshold nears. Threshold, not apocalypse, not salvation. Transition, we didn't understand if it meant promotion or quarantine reinforcement. The debate is still classified, though debate might be too generous. It was panic disguised as protocol. Whole think tanks crumbled under the weight of 2 words. By June 8, telescopes tracked Trident Atlas accelerating beyond Pluto's orbit, violating conservation limits again. No jets, no propulsion glow, just instantaneous increase of velocity as if space itself were cooperating. Moments later, nothing. Gone. Some say it folded out of reality entirely. Others think it slipped into a dimension geometry barely hints exists. I say, whatever it was, it left something behind. Our instruments still catch faint harmonics echoing in the outer heliosphere, a residue that hums exactly at the frequency of a sleeping brain. For weeks afterward, governments argued over exposure. Economic advisors warned of collapse. Military strategists drew up psychological containment measures. Meanwhile, a handful of us physicists sat in darkness, staring at residual graphs, trying to decide whether to feel exhilarated or horrified. Every once in a while, late at night, I check the sky again. Sometimes, if the atmosphere is still, I see subtle streaks of emerald, like aurora that forgot its poles. Our magnetometers pick nothing up. Maybe the boundary is resonating. Maybe the cage is humming because its occupant has stirred. And maybe the test isn't over yet. The countdown still ticks, etched not in code but in the planet itself, and the places glowing brightest are stirring. Whatever, threshold, the message warned about, it's closer than they're telling you. People assume apocalypse means ending. Maybe it just means evaluation. After Trident Atlas vanished, the silence that followed was almost worse than the transmissions themselves. For 3 weeks, every deep space receiver on Earth listened to nothing but the patient hiss of the cosmos. Officials called it null phase. Behind closed doors, it was the waiting. Expressionless men in suits claimed control of the observatories. Publicly, they said our systems were undergoing maintenance. Privately, they asked us one impossible question over and over: how much time do we have? But time for what? Our encrypted conference rooms turned into confession booths. Linguists debated metaphors. Psychologists charted anxiety outbreaks across populations that didn't even know what was happening. We, the scientists, had all the data, but none of the meaning, until we realized the countdown wasn't counting down in days at all. It was synchronizing with us. Each pulse in the electromagnetic residue matched global electromagnetic hums, tiny fluctuations in EEG readings worldwide. The countdown wasn't a ticking clock, it was a biological metronome. The object had linked its signal to the collective rhythm of human consciousness. Once I understood that, sleep became impossible. Every dream felt observed. We turned to the only clues we had left, the highlighted sites on the planetary grid. Governments dispatched climate archaeology, teams under cover of geological surveys. I was assigned to Göbekli Tepe, where the air always seems to vibrate an octave above normal. At 12 minutes past midnight local time on June 21, instruments detected synchronized micro flashes at 6 of the global coordinates. Stone to stone, continent to continent, they flickered in sequence and fell dark again. The pattern lasted exactly 23 seconds, matching the length of the final transmission. That, we realized, was the first threshold event. The world never heard about it. But the magnetic residue reached satellites. Auroral swirls appeared over latitudes they had no right to visit. Something beneath our feet had turned outward, as if those megaliths were antennae finally remembering their purpose. Back in California, the JPL quantum stack began picking up interference that wasn't interference. Inside the noise, our analysts uncovered faint symbol chains identical to those from Trident Atlas, as though the data were looping back from Earth itself. The planet had become the transmitter. Here's where it turns stranger than fiction. The interference pulse repeated images of the human brain, cross-sections, neural pathways glowing in blue fire. Embedded equations suggested that the boundary shell around our solar system wasn't merely containment. It was a mirror, a cognitive amplifier reflecting every spark of self-awareness that emerged within it. The test wasn't technological, it was psychological. The signal judged how we think. For years, philosophers asked whether intelligence arises from complexity or compassion. The transmission implied a third category, coherence, the ability of billions of minds to hold contradictory belief and still unify in purpose. Our global species mind, if you will, and coherence, it seemed, was reaching critical magnitude. One encrypted memo described it brutally simply: when enough of humanity awakens in harmony, the boundary will become permeable, and if not, no memo answered that. Across the planet, small anomalies began to appear, children describing the same symbols in their dreams, power grids flickering at intervals matching e.g. coherence spikes during global meditations, a series of geomagnetic breaths, Earth's field expanding and contracting rhythmically. We built machines to model it, but every time we tried to pin the phenomenon down, the equations rewrote themselves in real time, as though the universe preferred mystery to measurement. Some colleagues broke beneath the pressure. One linguist walked into the desert claiming she could hear the stars talking, that the hymn from the signal was repeating behind her heartbeat. Another physicist locked himself inside the resonance chamber, insisting the voice was teaching him how to translate gravity. I haven't seen him since. Meanwhile, governments prepared contingency plans. If the boundary collapsed violently, if whatever kept us boxed in failed, no one knew what would happen. Evacuation plans sound heroic until you remember there's nowhere to go. As for me, I kept watching the countdown. Its rhythm accelerated subtly each month, not linearly but logarithmically, approaching asymptote. Then, about a week ago, something changed. The pulse steadied. For the first time in recorded data, it aligned perfectly with the Earth's Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of our planet's electromagnetic cavity. Interpretation humanity had synchronized. We didn't broadcast that detail. But every night since, the auroral hum has intensified like the sky tuning itself. Last night, 30:47 a.m., Greenwich Mean Time, exactly 1 year after the first message, a new signal whispered through the noise. Not from beyond the boundary, but from it. 4 syllables repeated in the composite of 17 languages, layered until they blurred into harmonic consonants. Threshold reached. Proceed. No one knows what proceed means. Enter. Graduate. Dissolve. The philosopher in me wants to believe it's an invitation. The scientist in me dreads that it's merely the next stage of containment. Perhaps the experiment requires us to realize our captivity before we can understand freedom. If by the time you read this the sky has shifted, if stars flicker or reorder themselves, don't panic. It might not be invasion or destruction. It might simply be calibration. The cosmic exam isn't written on paper, it's written in us. Every act of empathy, every discovery, every refusal to surrender to ignorance pushes the waveform toward coherence. That's what they were measuring all along. When Trident Atlas said, "You are not prepared," it wasn't an insult. It was a curriculum note. A teacher's comment scrawled across humanity's homework: try again. You're close. We were never quarantined for punishment, we were quarantined to learn. So when the sky trembles next, look up, not in fear, but comprehension. The universe doesn't want obedience, it wants conversation. And if we finally earn the right to answer, then maybe, at long last, the silence will respond. If I disappear after this recording, keep watching the auroras. They'll tell you when the door opens, and remember, every boundary is also a threshold, depending on which direction you walk. They told us time was short. They never said whose clock was running out. Perhaps the countdown wasn't warning us at all. Perhaps it was the universe begging us to wake before it falls asleep.